to another episode of the podcast version of BTV. I'm your host today, Quintin Boston, and we are going to be tackling a very serious issue that is really beginning to make its way in the forefront in the African American community. And this issue is mental illness. Mental illness is something that is very serious in the Black community, and it's really serious in a lot of communities. It's not necessarily just something that is unique to African Americans, but what we want to get into today is the aspect of the African American community in general. And I don't want to speak for everybody specifically, but just in general, there can be an argument that can be made that this is something that is really not talked about in the African American community. And there have been several news articles that have been on the internet that have talked about this issue. And a lot of it has been stemming from the Miriam Carey situation up here in DC at the Capitol. And then we had the issue with Aaron Alexis at the Navy Yard, again in the DC area. We had Josh Marks, a reality star from Master Chef, African American, who committed suicide. Lee Thompson, the young former child star from Disney's Jet Jackson. Paul Oliver from college and the NFL football player. Last year we had Don Cornelius and countless others who have not made national attention. But today in this podcast, we have an expert that is going to come in and is going to be on the line with us today to talk about this issue. And this person is my brother, Dr. Quintin Boston. And Quintin is a licensed professional counselor in the state of North Carolina. And he is also a certified rehabilitation counselor. Quintin earned his PhD in rehabilitation from the Rehabilitation Institute in Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. He has worked in mental health as a clinician and a clinical supervisor. His research interest centers around multicultural issues in counseling, counselor education and supervision, and how cultures view and define disability. So we've got a professional in here today, guys, who can really speak on these issues. Quintin, did I get everything right?
You did, man. You did.
And Quintin, I know you're very busy. Thanks for taking the time, Dr. Boston. What is Dr. Boston, Quintin? How you want me to do it today?
Oh, man, it's Quintin always.
Okay. Well, Quintin, we would like to really thank you for joining us on this podcast today. And I want to first set it up this way, Quintin, and you know, feel free to jump in and reshape the questions if you want to. But I want to talk about mental health and African Americans. I want to start with that broad statement, and I'll let you go ahead and go from there.
Well, it's a very broad statement. You know, that question that you asked, we can talk about that all day. But we'll keep it pretty consistent here and to the point. It goes back a while, Marcus, in regards to, you know, when you're talking about mental health and mental illness in African Americans, one of the things you got to look at is treatment, and how, you know, and how individuals are treated, you know, if individuals are even going to counseling. And from a cultural standpoint, there for a long time, you know, individuals, let's just say individuals of color, but since we're speaking of African Americans in general, there was that level of mistrust in regards to what I do as a mental health counselor per se. And you look at, because you look across the room and you saw the individual who was actually providing services was an individual that did not look like you. But it was an individual at the time who was a major source of, let's just say, oppression for a lot of African Americans. So at the same time, you have this person here who has been a staple and a major source of oppression at that point in time. And you now want me to sit down and you want me to spill out my life. You want me to talk to this individual and I'm supposed to trust this individual to help me get to where I need to be. So when you're looking at that just from a quick, and that's just a quick history lesson in regards to African Americans and mental health, you have to start there, because it's like any other issue. From a health standpoint, you need treatment. Not so much, for a cure is good for some. It's actually great if you can get that for stuff, but a lot of times treatment is the only really viable options for individuals. So when you want me to sit down and spill out and talk to you, and these individuals at that time did not identify, they did not look like they were that staple or that source of oppression, it was difficult for African Americans to do that. And I think some of it just began to trickle down to where we are today. There things have changed a lot per se, but when it's constantly being taught and it's constantly being reinforced, you can't trust this person, or you don't say too much to that person, it can become problematic. So what you see now is the increase in what we have now, and people are starting to talk about it now with African Americans and mental health, but for a long time, it wasn't talked about. It was some lip service there, but you know how that works. Mm-hmm. You just talk a little bit, but there's not a lot of action put in place. So when you go back to that history, that's the reason why a lot of African Americans just don't trust. They just don't trust the mental health community.
Now, do you think that this is what has contributed to what we have? What a lot of people say in our community? This is an area that we just don't want to discuss.
Well, yeah, and again, you have to go back to that source of oppression. You're not going to, you're not going to open up again to that individual. So because you're not going to open up to that individual, the question becomes then, how are you going to deal with it? Because there's still a level of competency that an individual, that a person, they just must have, Marcus, to be able to deal or work with an individual when it comes to, and I'm not even just going, when it comes to the spectrum, of psychological issues that a person can come to the table with. It takes a certain level of competencies to do that. And when you don't have those competencies, or you're trying to just, quote, talk to this person, that's just not going to get it done. So when there was that level of mistrust there, and it wasn't, those services and individuals weren't getting help, then you're just continuing to perpetuate the problem, and that's why you're seeing what you're seeing today in regards to a lot of this stuff that's happening, and it's an African American face associated with it. People are shocked. They just can't believe it. But that doesn't mean that those issues weren't present in our communities. It's just at the time we're not getting help for them.
Right. Okay. That's really good. And I think that's very important when you say the level of mistrust as to going for counseling and things of that nature because of the person who historically was going to do the counseling. And let's just come out and say, historically, what was it going to be? It was going to be a white man, and it wasn't going to be a woman. Historically, it wasn't going to be another black person. Am I on the right track?
I think you're accurate. And what you have to keep in mind too is even teaching, this stuff, these theories and stuff like that. You have to look at it. A lot of these theories and a lot of this stuff came out of, to modern day, it's old. Okay, so you look at something, psychoanalytic theory, you look at Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud was not working with Quintin Boston, okay? That's the bottom line. So you start trying to apply some of that stuff to us, as African Americans per se. I'm not saying it can't work. It's just the therapist, the clinician has to be very careful, and they have to understand the cultural implications of a lot of this stuff. And again, like I said, it takes that skill set to be able to do that. So it's a little bit more than just having a conversation with an individual, but we know in the African American community at times we're just not willing to go and get that help. And I think it's because it's just a long history of it. So you're trying to change something, man,
that's been going on for a long time. It's been going on for a long time. And I know I have some statistics here from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Poverty level affects mental health status. African Americans living below the poverty level as compared to those over twice the poverty level are 3 times more likely to report psychological distress.
Yeah, I'm going to stop you there. And if you think about that, think about how this affects an individual holistically. Okay, we're talking occupational. Okay, we're talking family. Okay, we're talking friends. So all of this stuff works together. So you have the poverty issue, as you pointed out again, HHS, Health and Human Services, 3 times more likely to report psychological distress. Marcus, that psychological distress is not just going to take place at home.
Right.
See, it's not just going to take place at home. It's going to take place at work. It's going to take place also when the person
at
is
school, if they're a child, school,
right? Their child. So it becomes a holistic issue, other than just this person's having some problems in their home.
Yeah. And I mean, and this is just again to set up the foundation for what we're going to get into later with everything. Again, more statistics. The death rate from suicide for African American men was almost 4 times that of African American women in 2009, and that is interesting too, because look at what I just said: Aaron Alexis, Josh Marks, Lee Thompson, Paul Oliver, Don Cornelius. I mean, these are all men. So I think that this is very interesting to see that these psychological issues, which are leading to suicide, are really hitting African American men.
Yeah, they are. And the thing is, again, you look at it from you put it in a holistic perspective. Okay, that individual takes their own life, but you also look at the impact that has. Okay, again, it begins to possibly affect, well, it does affect family. Okay, then you look, it may bleed over into the workplace. It may bleed over into the community. So it becomes a community problem, a community issue per se, versus just something that has affected this individual. It becomes a community issue. It becomes a family issue. That holistic thing again. Right.
Now, so Quintin, you're setting up, that some of these issues that we are having, the issues of distrust historically, is what you're saying is what created a lot of it, just the distrust of who we would have to go and tell all our
the clinical provider.
Who we would have to go and talk to about this, which I think is very interesting. I hadn't really looked at it and thought about it that way, and looking at the effects of over time, not really having anyone in place to be able to talk about these things to. And I know we're going to get to the church and things of that nature. I know we'll get to that later, but with only having the church and the preacher or the deacons to talk to about this, can you talk about how that has played a role into where we are now?
Well, I think if you go back and you look, I mean, we do have a sense of community in the African American community, and I mean, I can speak on this because I am an African American, So I mean, the thing is, we do have that sense, and the research supports it. As African Americans, we do have that sense of community. Okay. Again, let me go back and take a look here, because I have some information in front of me here too. Got some studies from the American Psychological Associations where African Americans, again, 85% describe the respondents describe themselves as basically fairly religious or religious. And again, that prayer was one of the most common ways of us coping with stress. So it would not then at that point in time be uncommon for an individual to, maybe go to their spiritual leader, or, again, however they identify, per se, to go to talk to their preacher or talk to the deacon or deaconess or, to elder, or talk to someone in the church that can help them out. The issue with that, and I've taken some flack from this before, even talking with friends of mine, and not so much flack, but really having a hardcore conversation about this. The issue that I have with this, Marcus, is everyone does not. Again, you have to keep in mind when it comes to stats and it comes to numbers, these are just individuals that reported. So see, if you didn't take part in the survey, you don't have that data. You're able to generalize, but you don't have that data, okay? So my issue with it is this. Everyone walking around, we all know, does not have a sense of religion. They may not be spiritual,
right.
Okay? So this individual may not seek out. See, they may not seek out, even if they're told, go to the church. They may not seek it out. Or if they do seek it out, when they come and they sit in front of that individual, do you really think that person wants to hear about Jesus Christ? I'm just saying, do you think that person really wants to hear about it?
Right.
So you can't just assume that I have to go at it this way when I'm talking to this individual here or when they come to the church and they're looking for this type of help. So the concern, it's not the only, but one of many concerns that I have is this. There are some individuals walking around with some real clinical issues, okay? Severe clinical issues. And it takes a skill set to work with those individuals. And if that person does not identify like that, I don't think they want to hear that, let's sit down and let me pray with you.
Well,
A lot of times people have a hard time receiving that and hearing that, but that is the reality if that person does not identify that way.
Well, and I want to come in. I want to, because we believe it or not, we're really moving kind of fast. And now, especially, we're on this aspect of everything. But I want to talk about that, and that's why I kind of explained your background before we got started with a lot of this. And I guess I'll just say it like this. I'm an attorney. I focus on medical malpractice cases. I'm not a dentist. I'm not I'm not an accountant. I'm not an architect. And I think that the church does play a role with this when it comes to family and community. But I want you to kind of talk about, because you kind of hit on a little bit with the skill set and things of that nature. You're trained to know what to look for with some of these things. You studied. You had to take board exams. You had to have all sorts of things, I'm sure, that you had to have to do what you do. Talk about us in our community kind of needing to understand that we have to go to people who are trained to help us, and not necessarily the preacher in all instances, especially when you got a person who's possibly schizophrenic, someone who's bipolar, someone who's on different types of medication. Can you talk about that aspect of things?
Yeah, and I think, I sure can. And I think there are before we get going, I mean, there are pros to it and there are cons, Marcus, as I would say, per se, with this. You have the community aspect in regards to the church. Some churches actually have full-fledged counseling centers attached to them. Okay, I'm talking about licensed professional counselors, psychiatrists, psychologists, just full-fledged clinics. Okay, so you're not just looking at a situation where all churches are just set up one way. So you don't have that. You do have, if a person does have that spiritual or some type of religious frame of reference, then that person is going to be very critical at that point in time that person sit across from someone who's able to work with them and talk to them, not only from a clinical perspective, but also are able to talk to them from a religious perspective. A colleague of mine, she's a licensed professional counselor. She's also a Christian counselor as well. She's very much into the church as well. So see, she is an individual that has no problem, that can sit down, talk with individuals in her community, talk with individuals within the church setting, and just talk about some clinical and talk about some mental health issues.
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, no. What I was going to say is what the issue that I was talking about is the issue where we have ministers who don't have any background in nothing other than the Word of God, which is great. I have no problem with. Excellent. But I think that this is where we are falling down as African Americans. And there was another article that I don't have it in front of me, but it came out along the time when Jackson's suicide, when that happened, when Lee Thompson's suicide occurred. But it was dealing with. I'm not talking about the churches that have the professionals that are set up. Quinn, I'm talking about the ones who could be possibly doing more harm than good.
Well, you bring that up, and again, you have to understand. So you have an understanding of malfeasance. So you know what that means in regards to doing harm. I know what that means in regards to doing harm. So there's no way that I can sit across from somebody knowing that I'm just doing harm and continue to do it. What you're talking about and what you're getting at is this individual that's continuing to say, I'm going to pray for you, I'm going to pray for you, I'm going to pray for you. The issue with it is, Marcus, is that person doesn't know that they're doing harm.
Right.
And that's the danger when you just rely on one aspect of health. When a person does go to a minister, and that minister at that time they may be up against something that they just really don't understand, and I would hope that person that the minister or whoever that individual is at that point in time would acknowledge the fact that they just don't have the skill set. And I think that's the biggest issue that I see a lot of times, and I've had conversations with spiritual leaders with this, in regards to, if you don't have that skill set, you have to do what we do. You have to refer. You have to let this or shoot that person to a community resource in the community that can actually help them. And it's not saying that the church can't be that front line of defense, because if the person comes there first,
right,
then the preacher or whoever in that church should know the resources that are available in that community.
Right, that's right.
So the reason why we can't do it like that and just continue to do that and continue to just break the ethical principles is because I lose my license.
Right.
So see, it's a little bit more important to me that I know exactly what I'm doing when I'm talking to this individual. I'll take it a step further as well, is that if this individual, the spiritual healer or the preacher or the pastor or the reverend, if they don't have that clinical training,
right,
and you are sitting across from bipolar, or you are sitting across from somebody that's histrionic or narcissistic, and you don't have that clinical training, you can't identify, you don't know what the criteria looks like, you can do a lot of damage.
Right, that's really what the way I look at it, and the issues that I'm glad that you were able to talk about, because for me, a lot of times, and it's just like with what we do, a lot of times it's trying to find out what is the issue and then trying to figure out a solution to it. And that's what I want to kind of see if we can get ready to kind of cross into next, is now that we've said all of this stuff, what do you suggest that as in the African American community, as we're trying to talk about these things now, we're bringing this stuff up now, what do you think is one of the things that, and the people who are going to be listening to this podcast, Quintin, how do we go forward? What are some of the things that we need to be trying to do in this area?
Well, one of the things you have to know is, like I tell my students, you have to know, one, the resources that's in the community. See, that's the first thing, and the reason why the churches are so good when it comes to that is because the churches are a direct reflection of the community. See, they're a direct reflection of that pastor, that spiritual healer, that deacon, that deaconess. Those individuals should be very much locked in and plugged into the community. So when a person steps in or comes through that door, and they may be up against, and that healer or that person may be up against something that they don't understand, they should be able to point that person in the right direction, okay? And they should be able to make sure that person is going, you can't force the person, but point that person in the direction to get the resources that they need. The problem, Marcus, that I see is these individuals, they don't even know what resources are available in the community. I mean, I'll take it, I don't want to deviate too much, but I was talking to a preacher a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about disability and stuff like that, and I was explaining to him what vocational rehab is. You know, just a quick and dirty, persons with disabilities, get help for employment and stuff like that. Every state has this, Marcus, every state, counties, cities. He had no idea. So it's just one of those things where you have to know, if you live in the community, you should know what resources are available for these individuals, not only spiritually, but also mentally.
Well, and we've talked about now a lot about from the spiritual standpoint, but let's go on, Quintin, to people who don't go to church. What about people who may not, or they may not, they don't go to church? How do those people try to find out what resources are in the community? How do they do that?
I'm glad that you brought that up. The good thing about now, one of the good things about social media is you can find stuff at the whim of a hat now. I mean, you can type in on your cell phone. You can type in on your laptop. You can type in on your iPad. Some people, you can go through your PlayStation. You can go through your Xbox. The internet has given individuals an ability to not only find what restaurant they want near them, but you can also go and look and find out what resources are in your community. For example, even if you don't know where to look in regards to in your community, you can either do a quick Google search. You can maybe put in what let's just say the person does have bipolar, or the person does have schizophrenic. They are a schizophrenic individual, but it's on the milder side of the spectrum. They may be able to type that right into Google, and it pops right up the resources that are available. So I think that the social media movement is a really big asset for us in regards to finding out and getting those resources, because you point out, yes, everyone may not want to go to church. So with that being the case, it is right at your fingertips in regards to services and jumping on that computer. And the thing is, you may not even have a computer at your house, but the public libraries have internet.
Okay.
See, they have internet. They have computers. Again, you may find yourself a local one stop, okay, that has the ability for a person to print. They can use internet. They can get employment options. They can look and see what jobs are available. So, see, there are resources that are in the communities. A lot of times people just don't know where to go and look, or they just don't know how to start the process of looking.
Right. And Quintin, what about Bob? Because this has come up with Miriam Carey with her situation, and also with Josh Marks from with Master Chef. What about family members, Quintin, who kind of know, but are are afraid to speak up, or are afraid to go try to get their loved ones help because of the stigma. I was talking to a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago who was saying about the stigma associated with it. You're gonna be crazy. They're gonna label you crazy if you go and you try to reach out. Can you talk about the family members and possibly the person who may think that some things that are going, that they've got some things going on that they know are not right, but they're afraid of that stigma?
Well, unfortunately, that stigma aspect of mental illness is a problem. And one of the good things I can say about it, though, is when we begin to make those assumptions, a lot of times we are wrong when it comes to some of this stuff. For example, you may have a belief of what schizophrenia looks like. Okay, I'll just ask you. Okay, a person that's schizophrenia to you, is that a black person or is that a white person? What's the first thing that came to your mind?
Yeah, honestly, when you said something like that, I mean, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
What was the first? What was it?
The first thing, a white guy.
Okay, it was a white person that came. It was a white person that came to your mind. Now, again, the young lady that drove car into the Capitol. Okay, that individual, when it first happened, was that a black person or was that a white person?
Well, when I first.
Okay, it was a white person.
Yeah, when I first. Okay, that's what I thought.
So it lets you know. So did I. Okay, and I asked my students this same thing. Okay, the Navy Yard shooter. First thing I told my students, that's a white male. Blah blah. That was the profile. Blah 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 blah. Was I wrong? Yes. Was the individuals in the barbershop wrong that day? Yes. Everybody thought it was a white male. So see, sometimes that stigma can work in different ways. And what I mean by that is it's not a guarantee that it's always going to be what we think it's going to be. So I think that can that can lower the stigma in regards to some things, because some people just put a certain face with their disorder. They just put a certain face with it. Well, now, let me finish though. Okay. In regards to the help, like what you were saying in regards to getting help in situations like that, when you look at the family, one of the things that I like to look at is this. You cannot assume that the family is not a barrier. And see, that is a lot of times we refuse to look at that. Okay, because remember, family is supposed to be support. Family is supposed to be loved ones. In an ideal world, this is what it's supposed to be.
Right.
But sometimes the family can actually be the biggest barrier, because they may feel they're trying to help the individual by sheltering them. And that is not the best way to go about doing business.
Right.
Okay, so the family has to come to the agreement also that not only is this person, there's a stigma possibly associated with this person, there is also stigma by association. So the family or the other individuals, they just have to be aware that if I seek and I help my loved one to get this type of help, there's a chance that I'm going to be stigmatized, that I'm going to be stigmatized as well. There's a chance. But at the end of the day, if you want what's best for that person and you really care about that person, then that stigma will fly out the door and you'll walk right in there with that loved one at the same time, and you won't care who's looking or who's writing.
Well, and I guess, Quinn, that's the truth of the matter. I guess it comes to a point where you got to just put on your big boy pants, and either you have to just step up, even if it comes with a form of some type of stigma. The issue in a lot of instances can be life or death with people, and a stigma versus it 6 feet under the ground. I don't know, but that's something that I think that as society, I'm sure you would agree, we have to get better with that. Just because a person is reaching out for help, a lot of times we're so quick to throw a label on that person, especially in our community, because just like growing up, he just crazy. He trying to get a crazy check. I mean, it's those type of things, I think, that have hurt us. But through things like this, through education, that's how we can begin to change some of these behaviors and understand what we need to do.
Right, because the thing is, like I said a little bit earlier, Marcus, is it impacts everyone. See, it's not just this individual has a problem. This individual makes up a community. They live in the community. So more than the ideal thing is, you want this individual to get this help, okay? Because not only does it help the individual, it also helps out the community as well. So it's not just this person is having an issue. It's like we talked about a little bit earlier. It spills over into multiple facets of people's lives.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Quintin, I thank you for coming up and for coming on and getting on this call with us and at least talking about this and to try to get the ball rolling on this with African Americans and mental illness, because over the last year we've seen that mental illness is something, it's in our community too. And a lot of these services that you're talking about, I think a lot of people just aren't aware that there are services. And before we go, Quintin, because I had a good conversation this morning with a friend of mine who called me this morning, we talked this morning, and she was talking about in many states how mental health has become so tied to the criminal justice system. And a lot of resources are being diverted that way. And what I mean by that is, unless you are coming in through a judge or a probation officer or an arrest or something like that, it's affecting services that the quote non-offender can get. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, when you start taking away monies taking monies out of the community and shuffling them, to other areas such as the criminal justice system, it becomes problematic because, like you said, when you start focusing all the money there or the majority of the money there, then there's another program or other areas that's going to suffer. The issue that I have with that in regards to, and that's another conversation for another day, but I'll touch on it just really quickly, is, man, when you have these powerhouse states, and you know what I'm talking about, when the Department of Corrections is the major employer, okay, for these states, man, and you're talking about now mental illness and actually getting in there and working with individuals and looking for transferable skills and wanting this person to get back in the community and wanting this person to become a part of the community, Marcus, you're taking away jobs. See, you're taking away jobs now, because now this individual who has been in some trouble, they have been truly rehabilitated to a certain extent. They are in the community. They're not causing any problems. Marcus, you need less COs.
Right.
See, Marcus, you need less wardens. So that is a conversation for another day. But the thing is, you regardless of, even if they're coming in, through with the judge, you would just hope, okay, and at that point in time, you can only hope that the goal, which again, conversation for another day, that the goal of when that person gets into the system, okay, the goal is to truly rehabilitate that person. And I'm sorry, I don't see it in regard, I don't see it in the readings, I don't see it in the research. You talk to individuals who work in some of these facilities, again, mental health, I'm talking psychiatrists, psychologists, licensed clinical social workers, rehab counselors, LPCs. The rehab is out the door, Marcus. It's almost like it's a big, it's just almost like it's a storing facility, man.
Right. Well, and I think though, Quintin, and that's why this conversation is needed, and that's why this is something that we really need to get a handle on, because a lot of times when mental health issues are not caught early, then the child has a behavioral problem and things of that nature, and then they become labeled in some way, and then that label follows them all the way through. Then they have a hard time trying to get a job, and then so we're at this point we're moving really into a lot of other areas, but I think that that with a lot of these things, you can see the issues, you can really see it. But there's also one more thing too, Quintin, that I want to talk about too. How often, and I don't know, maybe you do know the answer to this, or are there any studies, how often are mental illnesses, their onset starts later in life? In other words, what I mean is, with a lot of this stuff, is it situational? Is it a lot of times, is this something that could have possibly been going on with an individual as they were a young child, and never really got the attention that it needed, and then it just began to become problematic as they got older? Or as a lot of times it's mostly from a life situation. You lose your job, you sink into a really bad depression, and things begin to unravel that way. How does this usually? I think
it depends, and I don't want to say it's on a case by case, but in some instances you're going to have some things in regards to. You think about a person that's let's just say they're born with a disability. Okay, they may be born with cerebral palsy or something. So see, you at that point in time, that individual, there's going to be problems. Not so much problems, but that person there's going to be some treatment that's just going to be ongoing. You take the person that has Down syndrome, there's going to just be some treatment that's going to be ongoing, with this individual, because the onset at that point in time of the disability for that person is the onset. It's an early onset. Let's take, for example, and you and I, we all know him, the person that decides to go in the military. Well, nothing wrong with that individual, man, before they decided to go in the military, but unfortunately, let's just say they were thrust into active duty and they had to serve their country. And then at that point in time, they may be diagnosed now with PTSD or depression or something like that. It's the onset at that point. Some is environmental, but I would say it's really on an individual. It's on a case by case, individualized state. I think that some individuals they're more likely, depending on the environment that they grow up in, they may be more likely, and I know I'm saying more likely. It's not a guarantee. They may be more likely to be diagnosed with something due to the environment and how they're growing up or how they're living, versus somebody else who may have a life experience. Again, like I said, the example with the military at 18 or 19 years old.
Okay.
So it's just not a one size. I think it's not just a one size fit all. This person is 6 years old, so and so. This person is 18 years old, bipolar 1 or bipolar 2. So it's situational, and it's up to the end of it's situational and it's individualized. But like I said, with some things, Down syndrome, a situation like that person is born with that, so the treatment begins early.
Right. Well, Quintin, like I said, I really thank you for taking the time to come in and to talk about this issue, because it is very important, and to really allow us to be able to understand this a lot more. And what I took out of it, really, one of the things that I hadn't really thought too much about was that issue of looking at who historically was going to be doing the counseling, and who historically was going to be the person who you were going to talk to, and I'm sure that is still an issue today with a lot of people, just being able to feel comfortable with speaking on these issues that they have. And I think that is something that's really, really important. And also the aspect of the church aspect of things. And I don't want people to get the wrong idea that I'm bashing the church or anything like that. I just think that the church plays a role in this also, but at sometimes everything has its own role, and for those who a friend of mine on Facebook, she said for those who are spiritual in nature, that you have to understand that God does give us people who are here to help us, so you can look at it as an extension in that aspect, that God does put people here to help us.
When I talk to peers and I talk to colleagues of mine, like I told you, I've been down through there before, with some healers and some, pastors and stuff. And that's the way I view it. It's like, look, man, I'm here. God may have put me here, or Jesus has given me this skill set, so I'm going to use it.
Right.
I mean, and he would want me to use it.
Right.
And see, that's the thing. He would want me to maximize it. He would want all of us. You have a skill set. You better maximize your skill set, man.
Right.
That mechanic has a skill set. Maximize your skill set. And it's like you said, you have a lot of individuals working as one. You can't just have a quarterback with no offensive line.
Right.
So see, you have all these individuals working together, and unfortunately sometimes I think from a religious standpoint or from a spiritual standpoint, we forget that the preacher or this other individual, man, you got help out here.
Right.
You have help, and just utilize your help, and that's you just can't forget that.
That's right. Well, Quintin, like I said, thank you, man, for coming. Is there any did I miss anything? Is there, because I've got some stuff that some of the materials that you sent me, which is really, really good, and I think that we've really at least gotten the ball going. Of course, we didn't go that deep into a lot of things, but my goal here today was to just start a conversation on this, to start talking about it.
I think that's the start, and I think the conversation is started. And I think it has to continue to move on with a lot of people at the table. I mean, I think you have to have your mental health provider at the table. You have your physician at the table. You have your attorney at the table. You got the mechanic at the table, because we all make up, the dentist, the police officer, councilman, we all make up the community. So see, we all make up the community, and we all deal with these issues. So you just have to have you can't just have one person at the table. And I think for me, and looking at us in the African American community, you have to have some people at times, man, that can speak on this stuff, Marcus, and you and I both know this, that really, they've studied this stuff.
Right, that's right.
And I think, to me, that's what hurts me a lot when I turn the TV on or when I hear a person talking, and then you go and check this person's credentials, and it's like, look, man, again, it's something that you won't do, and it's something that I won't do. You don't practice outside your scope.
Right.
Or you just mail your license in to the Board of Maryland. Or I'll just mail mine in here to North Carolina.
Right.
See, there's just some things that our disciplines will stop us from doing.
Right.
Because you just can't do it. So I think you have to have that conversation with everybody. And this mental health thing, I would like to see more of more conversation, more dialogue, and I would like to see more people that look like us, having these conversations, talking about this stuff in our communities, and I would like to see more people, again, that look like us on some of these national shows, talking about some of this stuff, man, because this stuff does affect our community, and you need to have people with the backgrounds and the authority to speak on some of this stuff. I'm not a dentist. You won't see me at an ADA conference.
Well, and that too, and that see, that's for me. That's what the big issue that I see with a lot of stuff, because, like I said, I know, and you don't want to get caught up in titles, and you don't want to get caught up in a lot of that stuff. Especially with a lot of black people, with the title aspect of things, but when it comes to certain things, if you are that heart surgeon, if you're a heart surgeon, you've been trained to deal with that situation, and I think that is where we're not finding the right people who can really help us try to get some of these questions answered, and people like you and others that can help start the dialogue going in our community with a lot of this. I was also going to say, Quintin, are you familiar with any national websites that people can go to for help?
I am. People can take a look at the American Psychological Association, APA. That's a website from when it comes to mental health. People can also take a look at the ACA, which is the American Counseling Association website when it comes to mental health. Again, you have your standard NIH websites. You have NIDR, National Institute of Drug and Research. You have their websites. You have CRCC, Certified Rehabilitation Counseling. You have those websites. So those are some, and then again, depending on your state, here in North Carolina, you could just, you can Google, North Carolina counselors, and then the North Carolina Licensed Board of Professional Counselors. That website will come up. If you're in Maryland, you can Google, Maryland counselors, and then that website comes up for the state of Maryland. So every state has licensure boards for counseling. So, or again, even for medicine, so those are some, you can go right there in your backyard and look those up on the website, and you can get help there. But the ones that I gave, those are just some national heavy hitters, big hitters that people kind of just Google, and those will pop right up in that Google search.
And you said something with Google too, Quintin, and that's I guess I can go ahead and my plug with what we do. We are a medical malpractice law firm here in Maryland, right. And a lot of what we do is on the internet. And I'm saying this to say this: in our community, African American community, we have to embrace technology. Yeah. And we have to realize that sometimes to be able to get the help that we need, we have to use technology. And like you said, if you don't have the internet in your house, the public libraries now have internet. You can go to your library, and this is something that we are seeing that we have got to understand as African Americans, that we can't be afraid to use the internet. You can't be afraid to use Google and Yahoo. You can't be afraid to put your questions into the search and hit enter to get help. You want to quickly talk about that, Quintin, because I know that's also, because I see it with our medical malpractice stuff. A lot of our African American clients do not use the internet. They are afraid of the internet.
Or what happens is they embrace the internet for things like Facebook and MySpace and other stuff like that.
Right.
But it's no different. Just like they're using the internet, for stuff like that, they can also use the internet to take a look at some of these issues. And like you said, I mean, even though we talked about that stigma, when you just search in and you put in Google or you put in Yahoo and you search in, I'm dealing with bipolar, and you hit enter, it's not going to say your name is so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. And I think because a lot of people at times haven't embraced the internet to use it as that type of tool, as a researching tool,
right.
Not
an
just
educational tool,
here and have a good time.
An educational tool.
As an educational tool, where embracing it as an educational tool can open up a lot of doors as well.
Right, and that's something that I think that we have to get better on, especially considering at least from our own internal statistics at our law firm, internally, when we break down the searches and we break down who we're contacted by, and when they come in, the overwhelming majority of black clients that we have, African American clients, they tend to be more of word of mouth. When we get and you look at it from outside of that, white clients, it's Google, Yahoo, email. It's a lot of those things. So I think that's something too that hopefully people who are listening to this realize that you can use these search engines, and this internet. It's a powerful tool to help you educate yourself and to be better.
Yeah, I agree with you.
All right, Quintin, we're coming in now on almost an hour, man. I know I know I had the outline and everything, and we kind of went a little bit all over with some stuff, but I was just glad to be able to have you on and to talk about this, because it's really, really important. And like I said, I'm just really glad that you were able to do this. And you got any other closing words, Quintin, before I let you go?
No, I don't. I mean, I just think that. Well, I do. I believe it's an important topic. It's a topic that's close to me because, again, this is what I do for a living. And there are, African Americans, Caucasians, Hispanics, people are out here, Asian Americans, people are out here on the front line providing services every day. And what I can say is, and to a certain extent, some things have changed, when it comes to mental health, because I am technically a mental health provider, and I have dark skin, so, and I'm born and raised in a small town. Okay, so I mean, it's one of those things where as society evolves, things begin to evolve. So you can't be afraid to step outside of that comfort zone, or you can't be afraid to say, look, I have a loved one, or I have an individual that honestly I really think this person, may need some serious help. And again, the person or the individual just who's helping them get the help can't be afraid, man, of the stigma, and can't be afraid of what possibly other relatives will say about it, because at the end of the day, you're looking out for the best interest of that person.
That's right, man. That's that, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and that's going to close us out. For everyone who's listening, guys, thanks for taking the time to listen to this BTV podcast, which is provided to you by Boston Law Group, LLC, a Maryland medical malpractice law firm. If you have a topic that you think that is important to the community, and not just African American community, just anywhere here in Maryland that we've got going on, you can send us an email at info@bostonlawllc.com. That's info@bostonlawllc.com, and we'll try to see if this is something, if it's something that we can put a podcast together on and talk further about. Again, I'm Marcus Boston. Thanks for listening today, guys, on behalf of my brother, Dr. Quintin. You have just listened to a podcast from the trial attorneys at Boston Law Group, LLC. For more information, you can reach us at 301-850-4832. And if you would like us to answer a question in one of our podcasts, send us an email at info@bostonlawllc.com. Thank you and have a great day.